Would you dare follow the sound of claws against wood? To uncover a family's most gruesome secret? The Duke of Shadows has spent a lifetime burying his history, but the attic is finally giving up its ghosts. Prepare to confront the blood-stained reality of a lineage that was never meant to be found. My name is Eleanor Winslow, and what I found in that house should have stayed buried. I should have left the day I arrived. I didn't, and by the time I understood why the servants wouldn't look me in the eye, it was already too late to run. The carriage wheels stopped grinding gravel at exactly 6 minutes past 9 in the evening. I remember the time. I remember it because the driver refused to say another word to me after that moment. He simply pointed at the gate and would not go 1 inch further. Blackwood Manor rose out of the fog like something that had grown there instead of been built. 3 stories of black stone, ivy choking the west wing, and not a single window lit except one. Top floor, far left. The attic. I told myself it was nothing, a trick of the moonlight, a servant lighting a lamp. I was wrong about almost everything that night, but I was especially wrong about that. The manor door opened before I even knocked. A woman stood in the frame, holding a candle that trembled though there was no draft. Her eyes moved over me the way you'd look at meat that had been left out too long. "You're the new governess," she said. It wasn't a question. "You want to leave before winter." I laughed, nervously, the way you laugh when you think someone is joking and slowly realize they are not. She did not laugh with me. She simply turned, candle flame bending sideways though the air was still, and led me into a hallway so long the far end disappeared into darkness before it ever reached a wall. I would walk that same hallway 41 more times before I understood what waited at the end of it. The Duke did not greet me that first night. I was told he did not receive visitors after dark. I would come to learn that wasn't a preference. It was a rule he'd built his entire life around, and one I would watch him break in the worst possible way weeks later. My room was on the 2nd floor. Small, clean, cold in a way that had nothing to do with the season. And directly above my bed, through the ceiling, through the plaster, through 11 feet of empty space, I heard it for the first time, not footsteps. Dragging, slow, deliberate, something heavy being pulled across old wood, 1 inch at a time, stopping every few seconds like it was listening for something back. I lay frozen for 11 minutes. I counted every one of them by the ticking of a clock I never found in daylight. Then the dragging stopped, and something exhaled right above my head. I did not sleep that night. I did not know yet that sleep will become the least of my problems. By the 3rd day, I had counted the staff of Blackwood Manor exactly 4 times. 4 times, because I could not make the number stay the same twice. Mrs. Hargrove, the housekeeper with the trembling candle, a stable boy named Cobb, who never once met my eyes, and a cook, Agnes, who left food outside doors instead of serving it inside rooms. That was it. In a house this size, that was the entire staff, which meant someone else was climbing to the attic every night. And it wasn't any of them. I asked Mrs. Hargrove, carefully, over breakfast, who occupied the top floor. Her hand stopped halfway to the teapot. "No one lives in the attic," she said. Too quickly, too rehearsed. "The Duke keeps it locked. Family matter. Not yours, not mine." "Then what makes the sound?" I asked. She looked at me the way you look at someone standing too close to a cliff edge. "The house settles," she said. "Houses don't drag furniture across the floor at 2 in the morning, and houses don't exhale." I said nothing else, but I began paying attention to every door in that house that stayed locked, and there were more of them than there should have been. I met the Duke for the first time on the 4th evening, in the library, and I will tell you honestly, I have never in my life felt so completely seen by a single glance. He was tall, dressed entirely in black, as though mourning had simply become his permanent uniform. His eyes were the kind of pale gray that didn't look at you so much as through you, searching for something you hadn't decided to hide yet. "Miss Winslow," he said. His voice was quiet, controlled, the voice of a man who has spent years making sure it never shakes. "You'll be tutoring my daughter. Nothing more." "Of course, Your Grace." "And you will not," he continued, taking one measured step closer, "go near the east attic stair, under any circumstance, regardless of what you hear. My mouth went dry. May I ask why? For just a moment, less than a second. So brief I almost convinced myself I imagine it. Something cracked behind his composure. Grief, or guilt, or both were in the same face. Because some of us, he said, buried things so they would never have to be found again. And some of us live every single day terrified of the shovel. He left the room before I could ask what he meant. I would spend the next 3 weeks wishing I never found out. His daughter, Cordelia, was 7 years old, and she was the only honest person in that entire house. She told me the truth on our very first lesson, in the flat, unbothered tone that only children use for the most horrifying things. That's where Uncle lives, she said, pointing her pencil at the ceiling without looking up from her letters. But you're not supposed to know that. Papa says Uncle is dead. I set my teacup down very, very carefully. Your uncle is dead? That's what Papa tells everyone. She shrugged, the way children shrug when adults are being obviously silly. But dead people don't ask for supper. I asked her gently, so gently, if she had ever seen him. Once, she said, through the door crack. He looked at me and he smiled and his teeth were... She stopped herself, looked up at me for the first time, and her small face went pale, like she just remembered a rule she wasn't supposed to break. I'm not allowed to talk about Uncle, she whispered. Nobody is. Papa says if the servants talk about Uncle, bad things happen to them. What kind of bad things, Cordelia? She didn't answer. She simply went back to her letters, hands shaking so badly. The ink smeared across the page in a long, jagged line. That night, the dragging sound returned above my ceiling, and for the first time, it did not stop after 11 minutes. It stopped directly above my door. I want to be honest with you. I am not a brave woman. I have never claimed to be, but there is a particular kind of fear that stops being about survival and becomes about needing to know, and on the 9th night at Blackwood Manor, that fear finally outweighed the other. The dragging started at midnight. I lit no candle. I wanted no light announcing me. The hallway outside my door was colder than the room I'd left. Colder than any hallway has a right to be in a house with working fireplaces on every floor. I followed the sound up the servants' stair, then the second stair, then the narrow, unmarked stair at the very end of the east corridor, the one the Duke had specifically warned me never to climb. The attic door was ajar, not open, not closed, ajar, the way a door is left when someone wants you to think they forgot to lock it, when really they wanted you to come inside. I pushed it open, and the smell hit me first. Copper, old copper, the smell that clings to a butcher's block no matter how many times it's scrubbed. Then I saw the walls. Portraits, dozens of them, going back generations by the fashion of clothing, every single Duke of the Blackwood line, painted in formal black, staring out of gilded frames, and every single one of them had been slashed. Deep, deliberate claw marks, dragged diagonally across each canvas, exactly where the throat would be. That's when I heard the breathing behind me. Slow, wet, far too close. I turned around, and in the far corner of that attic, chained to the wall by both wrists, sat a man who looked exactly like the Duke of Blackwood, down to the sharp line of his jaw and the pale gray of his eyes. Except this man's eyes were not pale gray. They were black, entirely black, from lid to lid, and when he smiled at me, slow and wide and delighted, I understood exactly why Cordelia had stopped mid-sentence. His teeth were not human teeth. "You found me," he whispered, in a voice like dry leaves scraping stone. "Nobody's found me in 9 years. I should have run. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run. Instead, I stood frozen in that doorway while the chained man, the thing wearing the Duke's face, tilted his head at me with an interest that made my skin crawl. "You're the new one," he said. "Governess. Pretty." He always did like the pretty ones. "Who are you?" My voice came out smaller than I wanted it to. "I'm his brother." The chained man's smile widened. Or I was, before the accident. Before Father's experiments went the way they always went in this family, badly and permanently. Behind me, the attic door creaked. I spun around, and the Duke, the real one, or the one I believed was real, stood in the doorway holding a lantern, his face carved from stone. "I told you not to come up here," he said quietly. "What is he?" I whispered. The Duke stepped into the room, and for the first time, I saw the exhaustion underneath his composure. 9 years of exhaustion, worn into every line on his face. "My brother, Alaric," he said. "Our father believed our bloodline could be improved, strengthened. He experimented on his own sons to prove it." His jaw tightened. "It worked on Alaric. It simply didn't work the way father intended. You've kept him chained up here for 9 years?" "I've kept him alive for 9 years," the Duke snapped, and for the first time, real emotion cracked through his voice. "Do you understand what happens if the world learns what my family created? They will not lock him in an attic, Miss Winslow. They will burn this house to the ground with all of us inside it." Alaric laughed from the corner, a sound with no warmth left in it at all. "Tell her the rest, brother," he rasped. "Tell her what happens on the full moon. Tell her why the chains are new every month." The Duke did not answer, but I already understood. I had heard the dragging every single night since I arrived, and tonight was a full moon. The chains groaned. I watched, frozen, helpless, as Alaric's shoulder began to shift beneath his skin. Joints cracking in directions joints should never crack. His spine arching forward as something ancient and starving climbed up from somewhere underneath the man he used to be. "Get her out," the Duke said, low and urgent, already pulling me backward toward the door. Now. "You knew this would happen tonight," I said, stumbling down the stairs behind him. "And you let me sleep directly beneath him for 9 nights? The chains have held for 9 years. His voice was tight, controlled, but his hands were shaking as he sealed the attic door with 3 separate locks. Tonight is the first night I wasn't certain they still would. Behind the door, something began to slam against the wood. Once, twice, each impact deep enough to shudder through the floorboards beneath our feet. "Your daughter," I breathed. "Cordelia. Does she know what he becomes?" The Duke's silence was answer enough. "She's seen him through the door crack," I said. She told me herself. "If those chains break tonight—" "They will not break," the Duke said, but he was no longer looking at me. He was looking at the door, at the way it bowed inward with every impact, at 9 years of careful secrecy shuddering on rusted hinges. The third impact split the wood down the center. I have relived the next 4 minutes of my life more times than I can count, and I still cannot tell you where I found the courage to do what I did next. The Duke turned to run for Cordelia's room. I grabbed his arm. "The silver candelabra," I said, breathless, pointing to the hall table. "In every story I have ever heard, silver burns them. Those are children's stories. Your brother's a children's story standing behind a splintering door, Your Grace. I suggest we test it." To his credit, he didn't argue again. He grabbed the candelabra in one hand, and together we ran not away from the attic, but toward Cordelia's room. 3 doors down, directly beneath the sound of splintering wood, and something enormous dragging itself down the stairs behind us. We reached her door half a second before the thing that used to be Alaric reached the landing. I will never forget turning around to see him fully in the moonlight for the first time. 7 feet of matted fur and exposed muscle, black eyes catching the light like coins at the bottom of a well, jaw unhinging wider than any human jaw should ever open. He looked at me, and he remembered me. From the attic, from the smile, from 9 years of nobody finding him. He lunged. The Duke swung the candelabra with everything he had, and where silver met flesh, the creature screamed a sound that cracked glass 3 rooms away. It wasn't enough to stop him, but it was enough to slow him down, just long enough for Cordelia's door to open, just long enough for a small, brave 7-year-old girl to step into the hallway, holding her father's old dueling pistol in both trembling hands. Exactly the way I'd once caught her practicing when she thought no one was watching. "I told you," she said, voice shaking but steady. "I'm not allowed to talk about Uncle." She pulled the trigger. Silver bullets are not children's stories either. I learned that on the 9th night at Blackwood Manor, and I have never doubted it since. Alaric collapsed at the top of the stairs, the transformation reversing in slow, horrified degrees until the man beneath the monster lay still on the floorboards, breathing shallow, human again for now. The Duke knelt beside his brother in silence for a long time. Long enough that I understood this was not triumph he was feeling. It was grief, older than the 9 years he'd spent chaining it to an attic wall. "He'll wake chained again by morning," the Duke said quietly. "He always does. And in 30 days we do this again." Or, I said, "You stop pretending this is a secret you can survive alone." He looked up at me, truly looked at me, for the first time since I'd arrived at Blackwood Manor. "There are physicians," I continued, "researchers, people who study conditions like this, quietly, discreetly. You have spent 9 years protecting a secret that is killing both of you. Your brother is not evil, your grace. He is sick, and sick men can sometimes be healed, but not by chains." For the first time since I'd met him, the Duke of Shadows did not have an answer ready. He simply nodded, slowly, like a man setting down a weight he'd carried so long he'd forgotten it was optional to put down at all. It has been 1 year since that night. Alaric is no longer chained in the attic. He lives in a private sanatorium 3 counties away, under the care of physicians who specialize in conditions the rest of the world refuses to believe exist. The chains are gone. The portraits have been restored. And for the first time in 9 years, no one drags anything across the floorboards above my bedroom at midnight. Cordelia still keeps that pistol under her pillow. I've stopped telling her not to. And the Duke of Shadows, the man who once told me some of us bury things so they never have to be found again, asked me 3 months ago to stay at Blackwood Manor, not as a governess. I said yes, because I learned something in that attic that I will carry for the rest of my life. The things we bury don't disappear. They wait. They grow claws in the dark. And the only way to survive them is to finally let someone find them. If you followed the sound of claws against it all the way to the end of the story, you already know why some doors should stay locked, and why some eventually have to be opened